First, on BBC1, the BBC News, with FIONA BRUCE.
There was no deal to jump ship, says ex-Tory MP Shaun Woodward. The defector denies Labour offered him a frontbench job to quit the Conservatives. As Russia goes to the polls, a new ultimatum for the people of Chechnya. Lifted to safety, floods, snow and ice hit Britain's roads. And the last European colony in Asia is handed back to China. Good evening. The MP Shaun Woodward has insisted that absolutely no deal was done with Labour to encourage him to leave the Conservative Party. And he said he wouldn't stand down from his seat at Witney in Oxfordshire to fight a by-election. Mr Woodward rejected Tory accusations of being a careerist and said a shift by the Conservatives to the right had forced him to leave.
Shaun Woodward's first full day as a Labour MP. Any regrets?
None at all.
He insists Labour haven't promised him a government job or a seat to fight at the next election.
There were no deals of any kind at all. There were no discussions which could actually be in any way construed as plotting out a career. As of today, I have put my political career in jeopardy for one very simple reason. The Tory party of today is extremist, it is right-wing.
Mr Woodward's defection is just the latest blow to his former leader. After the shambles over the contest for London Mayor, Mr Hague is looking damaged and accident-prone. And now those on the left of his party are issuing some stark warnings.
If we are not careful, we are going to hemorrhage support on the centre ground, and that will leave us marginalised in British politics, and that's not the basis of ever regaining power.
The former Deputy Prime Minister, Michael Heseltine, is urging the Tory leader to ensure the party remains a broad church.
The Conservative Party has to begin to fight its way back, and it can only do that from a position that unites broad strands of opinion.
The party leadership's trying to put a brave face on a sea of troubles. There are some fixed smiles at party HQ.
I've always believed that over the months ahead, as we develop our policies and people see that far from being right-wing, they're mainstream policies, they deal with the things that matter to people, you will see us increasing our position in the polls.
It doesn't look as though any other Tory MPs plan to follow Shaun Woodward out of the Conservative Party at present, but many do share his view that by sharpening the Tory message, William Hague is narrowing its appeal. One frontbencher told me he was watching his party head for a second election defeat, with all the inevitability of a Greek tragedy. Emma Udwin, BBC News, Conservative Central Office.
The votes are being counted in Russia's parliamentary elections. The Communists are likely to remain the biggest party in parliament, but a less powerful opposition to President Yeltsin with fewer seats than before. The new Unity Party, set up with his support, is expected to do well and rival the Communists.
The same concerns and hopes as everyone else in this vast country. Today, voters across Russia spoke of the poverty and the corruption which continue to blight so many lives. Not surprisingly, opposition parties, particularly the Communists, are hoping to pick up plenty of support as a result, but not perhaps as much as they might have expected. The war in Chechnya has changed Russia's political landscape. Brutal it may be, but it's also extremely popular. People see it as a just war against terrorism. For that reason, many voters have said they're prepared to rally behind Russia's government and Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. The former spy has endorsed a centrist party called Unity. It was only set up a couple of months ago, but polls suggest it could challenge the Communists for first place. If Unity does do well, then Mr. Putin will be on course to take over from President Yeltsin when he steps down next summer. The aging Kremlin leader has now guided this country through 3 parliamentary elections. None has been exactly clean, far from it, but Russia is slowly getting used to its own particular brand of democracy. The Chechen conflict has overshadowed these elections, much to the relief of the Russian government. Instead of being punished by the voters for economic turmoil and corruption, it could well be rewarded for going to war. Andrew Harding, BBC News, Moscow.
As the Russian people went to the polls, the country's military commanders were delivering an ultimatum to the rebel leadership in Chechnya. They told them they must agree to an unconditional surrender or face annihilation. The fierce military offensive there has continued with yet another bombardment of the capital, Grozny.
A giant Russian troop carrier heads towards Grozny. In the air and on the ground, more units are being committed to the fight as each day passes. Many villagers on the road to the Chechen capital have fallen already, shelled into submission, just as the Russians hope that Grozny will be. In Samashki, whole streets have been devastated. The village has until tomorrow to hand in any remaining weapons, or the Russians will come in to take Samashki apart. This woman told us many people died in the attack. She says the Russians were going to bring order here, but what sort of order is this? People here queue for 8 hours each day to get emergency aid in the areas the Russians describe as having been liberated from the Chechen fighters. Food is in short supply. The villagers complain their needs are being ignored. Satsita Khajieva says they're giving out only a kilo of sugar for each family. There's nothing else to eat. And now the small villages have been subdued, the Russian army is shifting its full attention to capturing Grozny, the greatest prize. Demands for Chechen independence are to be stamped out once and for all. Russia has given the Chechen leaders an ultimatum today: surrender Grozny unconditionally or take the consequences. Every so often here there's a rumble of artillery fire away in the distance. Grozny is taking a pounding, even though there's supposed to be a ceasefire in effect at this time of day to allow civilians to leave the capital safely. Jonathan Charles, BBC News, Chechnya.
More than 1,000 people have been killed in the floods and mudslides which have devastated much of Venezuela. The authorities say the death toll is likely to be much higher, as at least 6,000 are still missing. A big rescue and relief operation is underway, led by the army. Rescuers say their main task is to reach about 150,000 people who've been left homeless. Some towns are completely buried in mudslides triggered by the heavy rain. 4 people have died on the roads after heavy snowfalls hit southern and central England and Wales. 1 motorist was killed on the M4 in Berkshire. 3 others died in separate accidents in Oxfordshire, Northamptonshire and Cardiff. Severe flooding has caused chaos in Cornwall. Weather experts say the cold spell could continue for some days to come.
The treacherous conditions have battered many regions across southern England and Wales. Here at Launceston in Cornwall, several people had to be airlifted to safety after their minibus became stranded in floodwater. These dramatic pictures were taken at the height of the flooding, which has continued to affect many areas of the West Country. Several days of torrential rain have led to extensive damage to property on the Devon and Cornwall border. Here at Gunnis Lake, at least 20 homes had to be evacuated as the waters continued to rise. Meanwhile, at Salisbury in Wiltshire, the driver of this lorry escaped with just minor injuries after his vehicle skidded across an icy road and into a house. In all, 3 people have been killed in separate weather-related accidents in Berkshire, Oxfordshire and Northamptonshire. And weather experts are predicting more freezing temperatures across the United Kingdom tonight. Kerry Johnston, BBC News.
A couple are fighting to use their dead son's sperm to have a grandchild. Lance Smith requested his sperm be stored in the event of his death. Following a fatal car crash, his sperm is now held at the Priory Hospital in Birmingham. His parents, Barry and Natasha Smith, intend to appeal against a ruling by the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority that the sperm can't be used to conceive a child via a surrogate mother. Police are linking the apparent suicide of a couple in the Peak District with the murder of a man in Lincolnshire last week. Stephen Hogarth died of chest injuries after a letterbomb exploded at his home in Louth. Now police have revealed he had a conviction for assaulting David Broddle, whose body was discovered along with that of Lorraine Richardson yesterday. In a spectacular ceremony on the island of Macau, the Portuguese colony has been formally returned to Chinese control after more than 400 years. China's President Jiang Zemin extended his good wishes to what he described as the Macau compatriots returning to the embrace of the motherland. Like Hong Kong, which was handed back in 1997, Macau will retain considerable autonomy.
The People's Liberation Army, poised on the gates of Macau to march in tomorrow and reclaim a speck of land which has been run by Portugal for almost 500 years. They look daunting, but like in Hong Kong, these soldiers are supposed to stay out of sight and Macau's liberties unchanged for 50 years. That promise was already put to the test today. These are members of the Falun Gong spiritual movement, banned in China but not here. Hard to believe, but the security men in grey fear people like her as subversive and dangerous. Although they hadn't broken the law, they were spirited away, their serenity matched only by the police's anger. Arrested and later deported from Macau, a city notorious for gambling, prostitution and gang warfare. But today it was this meditating 10-year-old and her mother who were treated like dangerous criminals.
What does this say for the freedoms of Macau then, arresting these people? What you're witnessing is the bitter irony of Macau only a few hours before its handover to China. These people here have been arrested for doing nothing more than praying and demonstrating peacefully. And yet this is one of the centers of organized crime in Asia.
All an unwelcome distraction from the serious business of saying goodbye. 2 years after Chris Patten fought back the tears in Hong Kong, the last Portuguese governor in Macau was comforting the staff he leaves behind. The flag was rolled up and history made. After 5 centuries, Europe really does have no more colonies in Asia. And so to a ceremony which Mr. Patten, here as a guest, knows only too well, and which China has now got down to a T. With Hong Kong and Macau back in the fold, that leaves only Taiwan, not a colony, but a breakaway province. In a speech spiced with poetry, President Jiang Zemin expressed his hope that Taiwan too would embrace Mother China. Wishful thinking, for now at least. Tears of joy on the streets, but they know that this city of casinos has embarked on an historic gamble under a new master. Matt Fry, BBC News, Macau.
The former television newsreader Robert Dougal has died at the age of 86. For generations of viewers from the 50s to the 70s, he's one of the best-known faces of BBC television news. Our correspondent John Andrew looks back at his career.
For years, during the 60s and 70s, Robert Dougal was one of the best-known faces of television news.
Leaders of the Asian community in Nairobi have sent telegrams to Usan.
He'd worked briefly as an accountant before joining the BBC in the 1930s. On the day Britain declared war on Germany, his voice was used to broadcast an appeal to the Germans to halt their invasion of Poland. In one interview, he recalled the first time that TV newsreaders appeared in vision. Radio journalists were asked to present, and it didn't always work.
Excellent as these chaps were at their job, they were simply not practiced in reading scripts in front of a camera, in communicating news to other people, which is a special kind of skill.
He had his fun moments, appearing with other celebrities on the Morecambe and Wise show. Colleagues remember him with great affection.
He was seen to have great authority. People were they felt intimate with him. They knew him. He was part of their lives. Everybody knew him. Everybody recognized his face.
Outside work, one of his great passions was bird watching. For a while, he was president of the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. Robert Dougal was awarded the MBE on the same day as the Beatles. He once wrote that for lonely people, the newsreader, appearing night after night, becomes almost a trusted friend. It's perhaps how many others will remember him too. John Andrew, BBC News.
The newsreader Robert Dougal, who's died at the age of 86. The Millenium Dome has been given the thumbs up from the people who really matter, the public. 14,000 specially invited guests had a preview of what will be on offer inside the dome. Our media correspondent Nick Hire went round with a family from Yeovil.
The Parsons family from Yeovil in Somerset are typical of the millions the Dome's hoping will make the trip to Greenwich next year. For them, it's a 2.5-hour journey, and the train was 20 minutes late today, plus a quarter of an hour from Waterloo on the new Jubilee line. Total cost, with a cheap day return, just under £90, plus a £53 family ticket for the Dome itself.
You've got the body zone, play zone. Yes, you want to go around the play zone? Play zone, going that way.
Once inside, the problem's deciding what to see from a choice of 14 zones, a specially made Blackadder film and the show in the central arena. After the interactive games in the play zone, the Parsons sampled more games, combined with slogans about the environment in the Living Island zone, a mock-up of the English seaside constructed from recycled materials. Not all the zones invite you to play games. Home Planet is the only theme park-style ride.
Welcome to your capsule, interplanetary travellers.
Like much in the Dome, it's meant to be educational as well as fun. And today, with the Dome around half full, there was a 10-minute queue. The Parsons' verdict on it all?
We've only spent 3 hours here, and I don't think we've seen a third of it. And it's expensive if you've got to come up from the West Country, because it's about £80, £150 in total. If you're in London for any other reason, I think it'd be very good value for a family.
Children my age, or younger children, it will help them to learn, and maybe they'll go home remembering something from the day.
Well, when I first saw it, it was like, I thought it was very small, but when you got in, it was brilliant. All the zones were, well, the zones we've been in so far, they were really good. They showed a lot of like educational facts, and the big show was brilliant with all the bungee jumping, and that was brilliant.
I think already James is planning February's birthday. That's where we'll be,
So you'll be here again?
I think we will.
Today was a rehearsal. Not everything was ready or working properly, but the Parsons were impressed. The Dome hopes feedback from days like this will encourage many more of us to plan a visit. The Parsons' advice: plan to spend a whole day here, and if you come in winter, wrap up warm. Nick Hyam, BBC News at the Greenwich Dome.
Football. In this afternoon's Premiership match, Leeds United lead Chelsea by 1-0 at Stamford Bridge. The goal was scored by Stephen McPhail 20 minutes into the second half. If Leeds win the match, they'll replace Manchester United at the top of the table. An American environmentalist has stepped back onto firm ground after spending 2 years living in a tree. When Julia Hill climbed 180 feet into the giant redwood to protest against the clearing of local forests in Oregon, she thought she'd be there for a month at the most. She's now reached an agreement with the logging company involved to save the 600-year-old tree. That's it for now. The late news is at 8:45. Good evening.
Hello there. Conditions really have been treacherous on some roads across southern parts of Britain today, from ice and snow over the night, last night of course. And tonight again we're expecting a widespread and hard frost, temperatures as low as -10 or -11 in places. So do expect some hazardous conditions on the roads, icy stretches again a problem, and there could even be some patchy freezing fog by the end of the night. At least most of us though will have dry weather. We've got high pressure in charge, but still some snow showers to watch, particularly running down the east coast. The snow still building up a little bit in Norfolk and Suffolk. But those showers should move away during tomorrow, and then for most of us a dry day, not bad at all, although late on some problems. Rain starting to gradually nudge into the west, and as that pushes in across the west of Britain, we could well see a period of snow. In fact, it could be quite a problem area, I think, during Tuesday as that snow continues to settle. But for tomorrow, we start off with fine and sunny weather. In fact, for most of us staying fine during the afternoon, but starting to turn a little bit more unsettled late on across Northern Ireland. And as I said, another cold day for all of us.
Experience the dawn of a new millennium with BBC1 in one of the most ambitious live broadcasts ever. Be part of the Millennium's biggest bash with comedy, entertainment and live music.
Open our eyes and see 21st century.
Join BBC1's countdown to the new year as we bring you the people and events that will take you into the 21st century. Travel around the clock, across the globe and throughout the United Kingdom for over 28 hours of continuous coverage. 2000 today. The celebrations begin New Year's Eve on BBC1.
The news in London and the South East now on BBC1 with Shaun Woodward.
Hello, good evening. After a 3-year repair programme costing £3.5 million, Hammersmith Bridge is to reopen tomorrow. Local residents, environmentalists and pedestrians say they're unhappy that cars, vans and lorries can use the Victorian suspension bridge again. But motoring organisations say the crossing over the Thames is vital to the flow of traffic in West London. Max McKean reports.
For the last 2 years, Hammersmith Bridge has been a pedestrian paradise. But since it's been closed, public opinion's been split down the middle. Those who enjoy the fume-free journey, either by foot or by bike, have been happy. Residents too. But for motorists, it's been a nightmare.
When I commute each day often from Sheen into Chiswick, so it'll be a much easier journey once the bridge is open again.
This is the one small section of London where I could look forward to getting away from cars and stuff, and it's bad news.
When the bridge opens, I think it's going to ruin the whole area, which is a sort of 19th century character.
The engineering work on the 112-year-old bridge took longer than expected, so the transport row's been raging. Journey times for local taxis have increased, and so has local congestion. Meanwhile, residents in Hammersmith have seen their quality of life improve. They'll have to adapt once more to the environmental costs of reopening one of West London's key arteries. Mags McKean, Newsroom South East, Hammersmith.
A member of the selection panel which tried to drop Steve Norris from the Conservative selection contest for mayor insists they took the right decision. Mr Norris was put back in by the national leadership, but his critics remain unhappy that he could end up as the party's candidate for mayor. Ballot papers go out this week in the final stage of the selection of a Conservative candidate for mayor. It's only as a result of a rebellion last Monday by these constituency chairmen that Mr Norris has made it onto the ballot. Members of the committee which blocked him are still insisting they were right.
We are quite sure that the results that we put forward on Saturday were fair results. I think the party nationally were doing a slightly different thing. What we did was to apply very rigid tests and very tightly defined criteria.
There's little festive cheer in parts of Greenwich this weekend after local residents missed out on getting an all-important wristband which allows access to the town centre for the Millennium celebrations. 15,000 have been issued to control numbers attending riverside parties. Some householders are furious they'll be denied the right to attend what's been called one of the parties of the century.
Greenwich Council say even though the wristbands have run out, they're appealing to people to return the ones they don't need. This is the wristband you'll need to get into the central area of Greenwich on New Year's Eve. There aren't enough to go around and some people are feeling very shut out.
We had our party last night rather than on New Year's Eve because we were concerned that people would find it difficult to get here.
You can buy them in local pubs for 50p each. To be honest, I don't particularly want to pay 50p for a wristband.
But Greenwich Council say it's all about public safety.
It's quite clear to us that we don't want something like Hillsborough on our hands. We cannot do that. We cannot wake up on Millennium morning knowing that people have effectively been damaged by a crush of people.
There's little festive cheer around Greenwich town centre among those who feel locked out from what's being hailed as the party of the century. Colette Cooney, Newsroom South East, Greenwich.
Football now, and with seconds to go in the FA Carling Premiership game, Chelsea versus Leeds. Chelsea are 2-0 up, with Frank Leboeuf having been sent off. Finally onto the weather forecast. Dry with mainly clear skies tonight, leading to a sharp frost. Temperatures dropping to -6, but the brisk north to northwesterly wind will ease off to become a gentle breeze. Tomorrow cold, but plenty of blue sky and winter sunshine, although temperatures in parts of the southeast will remain below freezing, and nowhere will it be warmer than 1 degree Celsius. Wrap up warn if you're out tonight. We're back in breakfast news tomorrow morning. Headlines throughout tonight on CFAX page 160. For now, though, have a very good evening.
We are to have our lives together. If I'm to be of any use to you, I can't do it here.
So what do we do?
I don't know.
Give me my heart, give me my life back. I'm tired of feeling alone. You said we were good together, but where are you now?
Ballykiss Angel, tonight at 8 on BBC1. It's the village you'll want to go back to.
The Christmas issue of Radio Times is now available, your complete guide to programmes over the festive season, together with listings for all major television channels. Fat Sam and Dandy Dan are the rival gangster boys out to get their girl. Things are swinging over on BBC 2 now with the musical spoof Bugsy Malone. BBC One's treasure hunting in Worcester with the Antiques Roadshow in 40 minutes, after Pam Rhodes with the seasonal Songs of Praise.